The sun was dipping low over the small American town, washing the streets in a soft orange glow. Families were settling into their evening routines. Porch lights flicked on, and children's laughter still echoed faintly from backyards as parents called them inside for dinner. It was supposed to be just another quiet evening. But at precisely 6:42 p.m., the police department's phone lines lit up with a call that shattered the calm. The voice on the other end was frantic. "There are children in the warehouse. I can hear them crying." The dispatcher straightened in her chair, pen flying across paper. "Calm down, ma'am. How many children? Where exactly?" "7. At least 7. I counted their voices. They're locked inside. They can't get out." The dispatcher's heart skipped. She immediately radioed out the emergency call. Within moments, officers across the district received the urgent message. 7 children possibly trapped in an abandoned warehouse on the east side of town. The arrival officer Michael Daniels gripped the steering wheel as he sped through traffic, sirens blaring. Beside him sat his loyal canine partner, Rex, a German shepherd with piercing amber eyes and a coat that gleamed even in the fading light. Rex leaned forward in the seat, ears perked, sensing the tension. Daniels had been working with Rex for almost 4 years. They had faced everything together: drug busts, missing persons, search and rescue missions. But tonight felt different. Tonight, Daniels wasn't chasing a suspect or searching for evidence. 7 children's lives hung in the balance. When he pulled up to the warehouse, 2 patrol cars were already there. A small crowd of worried neighbors had gathered outside the chain-link fence, murmuring in fear. Parents clutched their phones, some already crying, others shouting at the officers for updates. The scene was chaotic, thick with worry. The warehouse loomed over them, a relic of the town's industrial past. Its rusting walls were scarred with graffiti, windows shattered, roof sagging. Once used for storing machinery, it had been abandoned for nearly a decade. Most people avoided it. It was a place whispered about in warnings to children. Don't go near the old warehouse. Now, that same forgotten building held 7 young souls. The first signs, Daniels jumped out of his car, Rex close behind, the dog barking sharply. He met Officer Green, who was red-faced and sweating, holding a crowbar. "The doors are chained shut," Green said, frustration in his voice. "We've tried everything, nothing's working." Daniels pressed his ear to the metal. At first, all he heard was silence. Then, faintly, it came a thin, muffled sob. Then another. Then a small voice calling out. His chest tightened. "They're in there," Daniels whispered. He turned to the officers. "How long ago was the first call?" 10 minutes, maybe 12. 12 minutes felt like an eternity. Rex whined, scratching at the door. His body was tense, his instincts screaming that something was terribly wrong. The chains the warehouse doors were enormous, thick, metal reinforced with bars, bound shut by a heavy, rusted chain and padlock. Officers tried crowbars, hammers, even ramming the door with a squad car bumper. Nothing worked. The rusted metal screeched but held firm. Meanwhile, inside, the children's cries became more distinct. One voice, trembling and high-pitched, shouted, "Help us! Please!" Another began coughing, the sound echoing faintly. Daniel's stomach dropped. The building wasn't just locked, it was dangerous. He noticed smoke trickling from a small vent near the side. His pulse quickened. A gas leak, maybe? Or worse. If there was anything flammable inside, the children had less time than anyone wanted to admit. "We need bolt cutters, now!" Daniels barked. "But the nearest set is at the station." Officer Green shot back. "That's 5, maybe. 10 minutes, round trip? We don't have 10 minutes. Daniels snapped. The children were trapped. The door was sealed, and their equipment was too far away. Every option seemed to close in around him, like the walls of the warehouse itself. The desperation parents arrived in droves, drawn by the commotion. A mother pushed through the crowd, screaming her son's name, her voice cracking with panic. Officers held her back as she pounded on the fence, begging them to open the doors. Another father cursed angrily, demanding they break in, his face flushed with fury and fear. Daniels felt the weight of every desperate eye on him. He was supposed to have the answers. He was supposed to get those kids out, but the chains mocked them all, unyielding and cold. Rex barked again, this time louder, pacing back and forth. Daniels glanced at his partner, and that's when the idea hit him. The spark of hope. Rex wasn't just a search dog, he was trained for rescue missions. He was faster than any officer on foot, agile enough to navigate through traffic, and disciplined enough to follow a command to the letter. Daniels crouched, meeting the dog's sharp gaze. "What do you say, boy? Think you can do it?" Rex tilted his head, ears twitching. In the back of his cruiser was a specialized canine backpack, typically used for carrying radios or small medical kits. Daniels grabbed it, his hands trembling as he strapped it onto Rex's back. The other officers watched, wide-eyed, as Daniels slipped the police radio and a note inside. "Need bolt cutters ASAP. Give to Rex." Officer Green frowned. "You're sending him to the station? That's blocks away through traffic. He's our only shot," Daniels said firmly. The release. Daniels knelt, gripping Rex by the shoulders. His voice was calm but steady. "Listen, buddy. Go to the station. Bring it back. Do it fast." Rex's tail wagged once, his chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. He understood. He always did. "Go, Rex," Daniels commanded, pointing toward the road. And with that, the German Shepherd launched forward, paws pounding against the cracked asphalt. He darted past stunned onlookers, weaving through the crowd and disappearing into the twilight. The parents gasped. The officers exchanged doubtful glances. But Daniels didn't doubt for a second. He knew Rex's heart. He knew his speed. If anyone could do it, it was him. As the dog vanished from sight, the muffled cries of the children echoed once more from inside the warehouse. Daniels pressed his forehead against the door for just a moment, whispering to himself, "Hold on, kids. Help is coming." And that was the beginning. 7 children trapped, a town desperate, and one brave canine racing against time with a mission only he could complete. The warehouse sat like a steel tomb at the edge of town, its jagged shadows stretching long under the fading light. From the outside, it looked unyielding, its iron doors bound with rusted chains that had weathered decades of neglect. The closer officers worked to pry it open, the more impossible it seemed. Inside, the cries of children came in waves, sometimes frantic, sometimes faint. Each sound was like a blade against the hearts of those gathered outside. Parents pressed against the police barricade, their faces pale, their voices trembling as they begged officers to hurry. Every second was heavier than the last. The officers struggled. 3 officers strained with crowbars, their faces dripping with sweat. The chains clanged and screeched, but held firm, the padlock resisting every strike of a hammer. "Damn!" Things welded shut by time. Officer Green muttered, slamming the metal again. The sound echoed across the street, bouncing off the brick walls of nearby buildings. Daniels clenched his fists. He felt Rex's absence like a void, knowing his partner was sprinting through the streets, carrying their one chance of cutting those chains. But he also knew that the children inside didn't have the luxury of waiting calmly. "Listen," one officer hissed, pausing. Through the silence, a series of coughs echoed from inside. The air seemed to thicken. Daniel's stomach turned. Something was leaking, something dangerous. The smell of smoke. A faint hiss carried through a crack near the vent. Daniels crouched and inhaled lightly. The unmistakable scent of gas hung in the air. His chest tightened. "Gas leak," he whispered. Green's face went pale. "If there's a spark in there." They didn't need to finish the sentence. Every officer present knew what that meant. If there was ignition, the warehouse could become a coffin of flames in seconds. The urgency doubled. Daniels turned to the crowd of parents. "Everyone stand back. Keep clear of the building." His voice carried authority, but he saw the fear in their eyes. Mothers clutched their children tightly. Fathers clenched their fists, helpless, to do more than watch. Inside the warehouse, meanwhile, inside, the 7 children huddled together in the growing darkness. Dust coated their hair, their small faces streaked with tears. The oldest, a boy of about 12, tried to keep the others calm. "Stay close." "To me," he whispered, wrapping an arm around his younger sister. "It's going to be okay. They'll get us out." But his words trembled, betraying his own fear. The youngest child, a 4-year-old girl with curly blonde hair, sobbed into her hands. "I'm scared. I want Mommy." Her cries set off the others. Some coughed violently as the gas grew stronger. Others simply whimpered, clutching their knees. They had been playing hide-and-seek hours earlier when one of them had dared the others to explore the warehouse. What had started as a game had quickly turned into a nightmare when the heavy doors slammed shut behind them, trapping them inside. Now they sat in the shadows, unaware of how close danger was. The crowd gathers outside. The scene drew more and more attention. Neighbors abandoned dinners, shopkeepers closed early, cars stopped along the roadside. Within 20 minutes, the crowd had swelled into dozens, then hundreds, lining the chain-link fence, watching with wide eyes. Whispers traveled quickly. 7 children inside? Gas leak? They're still alive. Phones filmed every moment. The red and blue glow of police lights reflected off faces pale with fear. Some in the crowd muttered prayers. Others shouted encouragement at the officers. "Come on, hurry. They're just kids." But the chains held stubbornly, mocking every attempt. Each failed strike drained morale. Daniels burdened Daniels. Paced in front of the doors, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. He felt the crushing weight of time pressing down. He pictured Rex darting through traffic, his backpack bouncing, carrying hope on 4 legs. But until Rex returned, they were stranded here, powerless. He pressed his hand against the steel door. It was cold, unyielding. He closed his eyes for just a second and imagined the terrified faces inside. He heard their cries as if they were whispering directly to him. "Save us. Please." His radio crackled suddenly. "Unit 9, Rex has reached the station." "Repeat, Rex is at the station." Relief shot through Daniels like lightning. He exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. Rex was halfway there. He just had to make it back. Desperation in the ranks. One officer slammed his crowbar into the chain again. The sound rang out like gunfire, but achieved nothing. "We're wasting time," he shouted, sweat dripping from his forehead. Another snapped back. "What else do you suggest?" "We can't break it without cutters." The argument only fueled the tension. Daniels barked. "Enough. Focus on keeping this crowd back and these parents calm. Rex is coming. We just need to hold until he returns." But deep inside, Daniels fought a gnawing dread. What if Rex got hit by a car? What if he got lost? What if? He shook his head, pushing the thoughts away. He couldn't afford doubt. The parents' pleas at the barricade. One mother collapsed to her knees, sobbing into her hands. Her husband crouched beside her, trying to console her, but barely holding his own tears at bay. Another father grabbed Daniels by the arm, desperation in his eyes. "Please, that's my little boy in there. You have to get him out. You don't understand, he's only 6. Daniels looked him in the eye. We're not leaving here without them. I promise you. But promises were fragile things, especially when time ticked so loudly in the background. The children's silence minutes dragged by like hours. The children's voices inside grew quieter. Some stopped crying, too exhausted or too weak to. Keep going. The silence was almost worse than the sobbing. It was haunting. Daniels pressed his ear to the door again. Only a faint cough reached him. His throat tightened. They didn't have much time. He checked the horizon, straining his eyes for any sign of Rex. Nothing yet. The street seemed too still, too empty. Every muscle in his body tensed. The crowd, the parents, the officers, all of them were suspended in that moment, waiting for a savior on 4 legs to appear. The rising fear, the air grew heavy. The hiss from the vent grew louder, and the acrid smell of gas thickened. Daniels ordered firefighters to stand ready, but they couldn't risk cutting into the building without sparks. Every option seemed to circle back to the same point, Rex. And then, as if the universe conspired to test their endurance, the warehouse groaned. A deep, metallic creak rattled through its structure. Dust poured from the roofline. The children inside screamed, the sound muffled but sharp, cutting through the night like glass. The crowd gasped. Parents cried out their children's names. Daniel's heart hammered in his chest. The moment before hope. Where is he? Green muttered, scanning the road. Daniels didn't answer. He was staring at the street, refusing to blink. He knew Rex. He trusted Rex. He had to. But with every passing second, the danger grew closer. The children were weakening. The gas was building. The structure itself was threatening to give way. For now, all they could do was wait for the sound of claws against asphalt, the flash of fur in the streetlights, the living embodiment of hope sprinting back into view. And until that moment came, the warehouse stood like a sealed vault of fear, holding 7 fragile lives inside its iron grip. The night air was cool, carrying with it the faint hum of distant traffic. The quiet of the streets was soon shattered by the pounding of 4 determined paws. Rex, the German shepherd, tore through the roads with unmatched focus. His backpack bounced lightly against his sides, the weight of the tools inside pulling at the straps, but Rex didn't slow. His amber eyes locked ahead, ears twitching at every sound, body honed like an arrow fired straight toward destiny. This was no game. He knew the urgency. He could smell the tension in his handler's voice, hear the weight in Daniel's command. 7 children were waiting. Their lives now rested on his speed. The city streets Rex darted across Main Street just as a truck barreled past. Brakes squealed, horns blared, and someone shouted, "Watch out!" But Rex was already gone, weaving effortlessly through the traffic. Cars skidded to a halt, stunned drivers staring at the sight of a police dog flying past with a backpack, strapped tightly to his back. People on sidewalks froze, pointing after him. A child tugged at his mother's hand, whispering, "Mommy, look." The police dog's on a mission. He was. Every step was a beat of the clock. Every heartbeat was a countdown. Rex didn't look back. At the station, the police station loomed ahead, lights glowing from its windows. An officer outside smoking. A late-shift cigarette nearly dropped it when Rex appeared, charging full speed toward him. "Whoa, Rex!" The dog barked once sharp, urgent. He stopped only long enough for the officer to notice the note tucked into the side of the backpack. The officer ripped it open and read, "Need bolt cutters ASAP. Children trapped. Hurry." His face drained of color. He sprinted inside, shouting orders. "Get the bolt cutters. First aid kit too. Move, move." Within seconds, a small team had gathered, stuffing the heavy-duty cutters, rope, and medical supplies into Rex's pack. One officer crouched, securing the straps tightly. "All right, boy. You've got to run fast. Lives depend on you." Rex's tongue lolled briefly, but his eyes burned with focus. As soon as the last strap clicked into place, he barked and shot off again, leaving stunned officers behind. The race back the return trip was harder. The tools weighed heavily on Rex's back, tugging at his muscles with every stride. But he pushed harder, lungs pumping, legs stretching farther. His paws struck the pavement with relentless rhythm. He cut down alleys, leapt over trash cans, and dodged startled pedestrians. Dogs behind fences barked as he passed, their voices echoing through the night. A bicyclist swerved to avoid him, yelling angrily, but Rex didn't even glance. His mission was singular: return to the warehouse. As he neared a busy intersection, traffic lights blinked red and green in a chaotic dance. Cars flowed thick and fast. Rex hesitated for the briefest second, muscles coiled. Then he bolted. Tires screeched, horns blasted, drivers slammed brakes as the German Shepherd wove between bumpers, leaping across lanes like a creature born for danger. Gasps erupted from onlookers. A woman screamed. But in the blink of an eye, Rex was across, his tail flashing behind him before disappearing into the next street. Meanwhile, back at the warehouse, tension clawed at every soul. The chains on the door remained unbroken. The officers' failed attempts had left them breathless and frustrated. Parents stood at the barricade, shouting names into the night, praying their voices somehow reached their children inside. Daniels paced like a caged lion, eyes locked on the road. His radio buzzed with updates from the station, supplies sent with Rex. He's on his way back. But where was he? Every moment stretched like a blade. The children's cries had quieted again. Too quiet. Daniels pressed his fist against the door, whispering, "Come on, boy. Hurry." Rex's obstacles, the city wasn't making it easy. Rex turned a corner only to find construction equipment blocking the street. A chain-link fence cut across his path. Without hesitation, he veered sideways, claws scraping asphalt, and sprinted down a side alley. The alley was narrow, cluttered, with trash bins and broken pallets. A stray cat hissed and bolted up a wall as Rex thundered past. He vaulted a wooden crate, squeezed through a gap in the fence, and emerged back on the main road. A group of teenagers on bikes stopped dead, jaws dropping. "No way, that's the K9." One shouted as Rex flew past, backpack gleaming in the streetlight. Rex's lungs burned, but he never slowed. The clock ticks down at the warehouse. The children were weakening. The oldest boy shook his younger sister gently, whispering, "Stay awake, okay? Just stay awake." Her eyelids fluttered. The air inside was thick, heavy, unbreathable. One of the younger boys coughed violently, clutching his chest. "I don't feel good," he wheezed. The group pressed closer together, trying to find comfort in the nearness of each other. Their hope was fragile, fraying by the second. Outside, Daniels felt the dread tighten around him like chains. He checked his watch again. Rex had been gone too long. The final stretch, and then at last a sound, not of cars, not of sirens, but of claws hitting pavement, steady and strong. Daniel's head snapped up. His heart leapt. There he is. Through the shadows, Rex appeared, his body low, his stride relentless. The backpack bounced with each leap, but he carried it as though it weighed nothing at all. His chest heaved, his breath ragged, but his speed didn't falter. The crowd erupted in cheers, parents crying out with joy. Officers stepped back, clearing the way as Rex bounded through, straight to Daniels. Daniels dropped to his knees, his hands moving fast to unclip the backpack. Good boy, Rex. You did it. The bolt cutters gleamed in his hands. The transition to hope. The officers wasted no time. Green and two others grabbed the cutters, attacking the chain with renewed strength. Each snap of metal was a victory. Each crack a step closer to freedom. Sparks flew as the jaws of the tool bit through the iron links. The parents shouted encouragement. The crowd surged closer, breathless. Rex stood panting, chest rising and falling like a bellows, his fur streaked with dust and sweat. But his eyes never left the door. His ears twitched at the faintest sound of the children inside. He knew the job wasn't finished, not yet. And when the final chain dropped to the ground with a clatter, the warehouse seemed to groan under the weight of what was about to happen next. The doors creaked, ready to open. And Rex, standing tall beside his handler, was ready to lead the way inside. The night air was thick with tension, heavy with the weight of desperation. The officers stood around the warehouse, their faces grim, their ears tuned to every faint sound coming from within. Somewhere inside, the cries of 7 children echoed, a haunting reminder of the stakes. With every passing second, the situation grew more dangerous. Smoke continued to trickle from a crack in the warehouse walls, the smell acrid, stinging the nostrils of everyone present. Officer Daniels clenched, his fists fighting the urge to break down the door with sheer force, though he knew it would only waste time. The chains on the entrance were too strong. No axe, no crowbar had been able to break them. They had all put in their strength, but the rusty steel links held like iron shackles, binding life and death together. Time wasn't just running out, it was racing, like a clock striking faster with each heartbeat. "Where's Rex?" one of the officers muttered nervously, scanning the darkness down the street. Daniel's eyes, sharp and unwavering, remained fixed on the horizon. He trusted his partner. Rex wasn't just a dog, he was a soldier, a comrade who had been trained for moments exactly like this. But still, even the bravest human hearts faltered when lives hung in the balance. "He'll come," Daniels whispered more to himself than anyone else. "He knows." Inside the warehouse, the 7 children were huddled together in the far corner. The oldest, barely 12, tried to shield the younger ones, pulling them close with trembling arms. The little ones sobbed quietly, their cheeks streaked with tears. "Don't worry," the oldest boy whispered, his voice cracking but firm. "They'll come for us. The police, they'll come." But the air was growing thicker. The gas leak hissed relentlessly, mixing with the smoky haze. Each breath burned their throats a little more. The youngest girl clung to a tattered doll, her wide eyes darting toward the door. "I'm scared," she whimpered. "I want to go home." The boy squeezed her hand. "We just have to wait. They'll find a way." Back outside, the minutes stretched into what felt like eternity. Officers were pacing, radios crackling with constant updates. No backup cutters yet. Traffic's blocked 2 blocks down. Fire department en route, but still at least 10 minutes out, a voice reported. 10 minutes. Daniels closed his eyes briefly. 10 minutes was a lifetime too long. Then, like a shot of lightning in the night, a sharp bark pierced through the tension. Heads whipped around, and every officer froze in disbelief. From the shadows of the street, a shape came hurtling forward, powerful and unrelenting. His legs pumped with tireless strength, his chest heaved with determination, and strapped to his back was the backpack, the lifeline they had been waiting for. "Rex!" Daniels shouted, his voice breaking with relief. The German shepherd bounded forward, ears pinned back against the wind, his paws barely touching the pavement as he raced toward them. The reflective straps of his harness glimmered under the streetlights, bouncing with his stride. His fur was damp with sweat, but his eyes burned with focus. He didn't slow until he skidded to a halt right before Daniels, panting hard but still. Standing tall, the officers erupted in cheers. Some clapped, others shouted, but all were united in awe at the dog's speed and determination. Daniels wasted no time. He dropped to his knees, unzipped the backpack, and pulled out the bolt cutters. A cold steel glinted under the flashing red lights of the police cruisers. "Let's move," Daniels barked to his team. With renewed hope, the officers surged toward the chained door. Two men held the cutters steady, while Daniels positioned himself over the thick metal links. With a grunt of effort, he pressed down, muscles straining. A loud snap rang out as the first chain gave way. Applause broke out among the officers, but there was no time to celebrate. They needed every chain broken, and fast. Rex stood guard, pacing near the entrance, ears flicking at every sound from within. His instincts screamed urgency. He could hear the muffled cries of the children, faint and desperate. He growled softly, glancing back at Daniels as if urging him to hurry. The second chain snapped, then the third. The officers were drenched in sweat, their arms shaking from the strain, but adrenaline kept them moving. Each clink of falling steel was a victory. Each second shaved off their fight against death. Finally, the last chain gave way, clattering to the ground with a sharp clang that echoed into the night. Daniels kicked the heavy lock aside and pulled the door with all his might. The hinges groaned, protesting years of rust and neglect, but slowly, painfully, the massive door creaked open. Flashlights cut through the thick haze as the officers aimed their beams into the darkness. "We've got them," someone shouted. 7 small figures huddled together in the shadows, eyes wide and glistening in the sudden light. For a moment, the children froze, afraid it was another trick, another cruel twist in their nightmare. But then Rex stepped forward, his silhouette strong and steady in the doorway. His tail wagged once, low and reassuring, as his deep bark filled the space. The youngest girl gasped, her tear-streaked face breaking into the faintest smile. "The puppy," she whispered. She stood first, stumbling toward the doorway, her tiny feet dragging. The others followed, their instincts telling them to trust the animal who had come for them. Rex lowered his body, guiding them, his eyes flicking back to the smoke-filled room behind them. Daniels shouted instructions, waving the officers forward. "Move in, 2 at a time. Get them out safely. Watch the structure, it's unstable." As the children stumbled into the arms of waiting officers, the tension outside shifted. Parents, who had gathered behind the barricade, sobbed openly as they saw small hands reaching for safety. The youngest child clutched Rex's fur, refusing to let go as she crossed the threshold. But even as relief swept through the crowd, danger still loomed. The hiss of the leaking gas grew louder, almost like a sinister warning. A faint rumble echoed inside the warehouse, and dust sifted down from the beams above. Daniel's gut tightened. They weren't out of the woods yet. "Everyone out now," he barked. The officers hurried, pulling children one by one into the night air. But the seconds were razor-thin. Just as the last child was guided forward, a loud crack split the air like thunder. The ground trembled as a section of the ceiling groaned and threatened to give way. Rex barked sharply, spinning back into the building. Daniels cursed, lunging forward, but the dog was faster. Inside, the last child had frozen, paralyzed by fear. Rex bounded toward him, nudging his legs, barking urgently. The boy blinked, his small body trembling, then grabbed onto Rex's collar. With one determined tug, Rex dragged him toward the door. Daniels met them halfway, scooping the boy into his arms as Rex leapt past him. A split second later, the ceiling beams crashed down behind them with a deafening roar. Dust and smoke blasted outward, pushing the officers and children into the safety of the night. The crowd screamed, but then silence fell as realization set in. They had made it out, every single one of them. 7 children. Alive, the officers. Coughed, waving away the dust, their eyes watering but filled with relief. Parents rushed forward, wrapping their arms around their children, holding them as though they'd never let go again. The sobs were uncontrollable, mingling with the cheers of onlookers. In the middle of it all stood Rex, panting heavily, his fur coated in grime, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion. Yet his eyes gleamed, proud and unbroken. He lifted his head and barked once more, a sound that carried not fear, but triumph. Daniels knelt beside him, placing a firm hand on his partner's neck. "You did it, boy," he whispered, voice cracking with emotion. "You saved them." And in that moment, as the night sky settled with the hum of relief and gratitude, everyone present knew the truth. It wasn't just the officers or the equipment that had made the rescue possible. It was Rex the dog who had raced against time, carrying hope on his back and bringing 7 children out of the darkness into the light. The warehouse still smoldered behind them, a reminder of how close tragedy had come. But against all odds, life had prevailed. And at the heart of it stood a German shepherd whose courage had redefined what it meant to be a hero. The last chain clattered to the ground, sparking against the concrete floor as it snapped loose. For a split second, the world seemed to pause. Officers exchanged quick, tense glances, and the crowd outside held its collective breath. Then, with a groaning screech that echoed like thunder, the warehouse doors swung open. A rush of stale, smoke-laced air burst outward, making the officers cough and squint. Inside, their flashlights cut through the blackness, revealing nothing but shadows at first. Then huddled together in a tight circle against the far wall, they saw them. 7 small figures, trembling, their eyes wide with fear. Children, their little faces, smeared with soot, reflected the pale beams of light. Some clutched one another, others pressed their hands over their mouths to keep from crying out. The youngest, barely more than a toddler, whimpered softly. Relief surged through the officers, but it was quickly smothered by the hiss that filled the silence. A broken gas pipe along the wall leaked steadily, releasing an ominous fog into the air. The acrid stench of chemicals confirmed what they already feared. The danger was far from over. "Gas leak," Officer Daniels shouted, his voice firm but urgent. "We don't have much time. Get them out now." Rex, the German shepherd, didn't wait for orders. He sprang forward, paws striking the dusty floor with purpose. His ears twitched, tail lowered, his entire body alert, as if he fully understood the urgency of the mission. The children turned their eyes toward him, and something remarkable happened. Their terror softened, where the sight of strange men in heavy uniforms had overwhelmed them. Rex's presence offered comfort. He wasn't just a police dog in that moment. He was a protector, a friend. The oldest boy, maybe 10 years old, stood first. His chest rose and fell quickly, but he nodded toward Rex. "Come on," he whispered to the others. "We need to follow the dog." The group shuffled to their feet, some stumbling from exhaustion, others coughing in the growing haze. Rex barked once, sharp and commanding, then turned toward the door, looking back to make sure they were behind him. One by one, the children moved forward, placing their trust in the animal leading the way. The officers fanned out, creating a barrier of safety. Daniels bent low, his flashlight guiding their path. "Easy now, keep moving," he urged, though. His eyes darted nervously to the ceiling. The building groaned with each shift, beams above threatening to give way. Suddenly, a loud crack split the air. Dust rained down as part of the ceiling sagged. The children screamed, ducking instinctively. Rex barked furiously, darting to the side of the group, circling them like a shield. His presence steadied the officers as much as it did the children, reminding everyone to stay focused. They pressed on. The thick gas made breathing harder, burning in their throats. Daniels ripped off his own mask and placed it over the smallest child, a girl no older than 4. Her teary eyes blinked up at him, confusion etched on her face, but her breathing steadied under the protection. Daniels choked on the fumes, but he pressed forward. Saving them mattered more than anything else. Halfway to the door, one child stumbled. A boy of about 7 tripped on a broken plank, collapsing with a cry of pain. His ankle twisted, and he couldn't rise. Before an officer could react, Rex rushed to him, nudging his arm with his snout, barking insistently. The boy clung to Rex's fur, and the dog gently pulled, helping him back up. Daniels quickly scooped the child into his arms, carrying him toward the light. Every second dragged like an eternity. The gas hissed louder now, the pipe vibrating. Under pressure. Sparks flickered from exposed wires dangling above, threatening to ignite the fumes at any moment. Officers knew they were walking a razor's edge. If the gas caught flame, the warehouse would become an inferno. At last, the faint glow of the open doors appeared through the haze. The fresh air outside seemed impossibly far, but it was enough to spur them on. The children coughed and cried, but none dared stop. Rex started back and forth, making sure no one was left behind. Almost there. Keep moving, Daniels urged, his voice hoarse. The children stumbled the last few feet, and suddenly the night air hit their faces. Officers rushed to usher them outside, where parents screamed their names, reaching with desperate arms. One by one, the children spilled into the open, collapsing into the embraces of their families. Tears flowed freely, cries of relief rising into the night. But the mission wasn't complete. Rex halted just inside the threshold, scanning the smoky room with sharp eyes. He turned back once, as if counting, making sure every small figure had escaped. Only then did he step outside, his body covered in soot, chest heaving. Daniels followed last, stumbling into the open air just as another crack split the building. Behind them, the warehouse let out a thunderous groan. The officers barely had time to pull back before the ceiling gave way. The roof collapsed inward, flames erupting as the gas finally caught fire. The ground trembled with the force, windows shattering outward in a blast of heat and smoke. Parents shielded their children, clutching them tighter, realizing just how close they had come to losing them forever. The crowd stood in stunned silence, the devastation illuminating the night sky. And in the center of it all was Rex, dusty, panting, but standing tall. His ears twitched, eyes locked on the children as if counting once more. All 7 safe. The youngest girl, the same one who had worn Daniel's mask, slipped from her mother's arms. She toddled forward through the chaos, ignoring the shouts of adults. Her tiny hands reached for Rex, who lowered his head curiously. Without hesitation, she wrapped her arms around his neck, clinging to him as though he were the reason she was still alive. "Thank you, puppy," she whispered, her voice small but clear enough for those nearby to hear. A ripple went through the crowd, an audible gasp, followed by soft sobs. Officers exchanged glances, some wiping their eyes discreetly. For all their training and courage, it was the dog's loyalty, speed, and instincts that had made the rescue possible. Daniels knelt beside his partner, resting a hand on Rex's back. His throat burned from the fumes, but he managed to whisper, "You did it, boy. You brought them out." Rex's tail wagged once, slow but proud, as if he understood. The warehouse continued to burn behind them, but nobody looked back. The focus was on the children alive, trembling in their parents' arms, and on the unlikely hero who had led them through the darkness. In that moment, Rex wasn't just a K-9 unit. He wasn't just a trained police dog. To everyone watching, he was a symbol of courage, of hope, of the unbreakable bond between human and animal. And though the night had been filled with fear and destruction, it ended with something stronger: gratitude. Gratitude for life, for family, and for the four-legged hero who had carried 7 children through the shadows and into safety. The air inside the warehouse had grown unbearably heavy, thick with the hiss of escaping gas and the acrid tang of smoke. Each second seemed to stretch into eternity, every sound magnified, the groaning of strained beams above, the coughing of frightened children, and the bark of Rex echoing like a warning bell in the suffocating darkness. Daniels could feel the pressure mounting. His hands trembled as he gripped the bolt cutters, but there was no room for hesitation anymore. One wrong move and 7 innocent lives could be swallowed by the crumbling building. He met Rex's eyes. The K9's gaze, fierce and unwavering, seemed to say, "We don't stop until they're safe." The chains fell with a final metallic snap, and the doors creaked open, flooding the space with cold night air. Relief surged through the officers, but it was short-lived. The cries of the children grew sharper, more frantic, as the reality of the danger inside became clear. Flashlights cut through the gloom, illuminating terrified faces streaked with dirt and tears. "Move quickly," Daniels ordered, his voice tight with urgency. "Stay low. Follow the dog." Rex was the first inside, padding carefully, ears perked and tail low. His instincts sharpened with every step. He knew the children were his responsibility now. One by one, the little ones latched onto him, their tiny hands brushing his fur as if clinging to safety itself. But then, above them, came the sound no rescuer wanted to hear. A sharp, echoing crack. Everyone froze. The children's eyes darted upward. Dust drifted from the ceiling like ominous snow, coating their hair and shoulders. The building had already been unstable when they arrived. Now, with the heat and pressure, the beams were beginning to fail. "Get them out now," Daniels shouted, waving to the nearest officer. 2 officers rushed forward, scooping up the youngest, while the others guided the older children toward the door. Rex barked, nudging the stragglers, refusing to let a single one lag behind. His determination pushed them forward, even when fear paralyzed their small legs. Another thunderous crack split the air, followed by the screech of metal tearing loose. The ceiling groaned above them, beams bending under the weight. Panic threatened to overwhelm the group as chunks of plaster rained down. One child shrieked, clutching Rex's neck as if he were the only thing holding her steady. Daniel's heart raced. He had been in dangerous rescues before, but this was different. The thought of losing even one child made his chest tighten like a vice. He kept urging them forward, shouting over the chaos, but his eyes never left Rex. The dog's unwavering focus was keeping the children from collapsing into panic. Suddenly, the final child tripped, falling hard to the ground. Her sobs filled the room, echoing louder than the collapsing beams. Rex immediately doubled back, nosing her shoulder and barking until Daniels rushed to lift her into his arms. "Good boy, Rex. Keep them moving," Daniels gasped, carrying the girl as dust clouded his vision. The group stumbled forward, coughing violently as smoke filled their lungs. Their steps quickened as the open door came into sight, a rectangle of safety amid the chaos. Officers waiting outside reached in, grabbing children by the arms, pulling them to safety one after another. And came the worst sound of all, a deafening roar. The ceiling gave way in a cascade of destruction. Massive beams collapsed, slamming into the ground with bone-shaking force. The warehouse shuddered, groaned, and began folding in on itself. "Daniels! Out, now!" a fellow officer screamed. But Daniels couldn't leave not until Rex was clear. He looked back just in time to see the dog darting under a falling plank, pushing one last child forward with his nose. Daniels dropped the girl into waiting arms outside and lunged back, shouting Rex's name. The K-9 sprinted toward him just as another section of ceiling came crashing down, blocking the path. Dust exploded in the air, choking them both. Daniels' heart lurched. Was this it? But out of the smoke, Rex emerged, leaping over the wreckage with the grace of a born protector. Daniels caught him mid-stride, clutching his harness as they both stumbled out the door just as the warehouse collapsed fully behind them. The night sky filled with dust and debris. The once imposing structure was now a heap of rubble, groaning under its own weight. Silence followed, broken only by the coughing of children and the sobs of relieved parents. Outside, the scene was chaos, but also salvation. Officers herded the children into their parents' arms, where sobs and cries of joy blended into the night air. Mothers and fathers clutched their little ones, kissing their dirt-streaked faces, thanking God for a miracle they thought they might never receive. One mother collapsed to her knees, holding her son tightly against her chest, whispering over and over, "I thought I lost you." Her husband knelt beside her, tears streaming down his face as he kissed the boy's head. Rex stood among them, panting heavily, his fur coated in ash and dust. He didn't look like a polished police dog in that moment. He looked like a soldier who had given everything to win a battle. Yet when the youngest child reached for him, he lowered his head gently, allowing her to hug him around the neck. "Thank you, puppy," she whispered, her tiny voice trembling but full of gratitude. Daniel's throat tightened as he watched. He placed a hand on Rex's back, pride swelling in his chest. "You did it, boy. You saved them." The other officers gathered, their faces etched with awe. They had seen heroism before, but nothing like this, nothing that combined instinct, loyalty, and sheer courage in the way Rex had. In the silence that followed, the reality of what had just happened washed over them. If not for Rex's speed, his intelligence, and his unshakable determination, 7 children might not have made it out alive. The warehouse was gone, swallowed by fire and collapse, but what it had nearly taken was now standing safe in the arms of their families. As paramedics arrived, checking the children for injuries and giving them oxygen, Daniels crouched beside Rex. He scratched behind the dog's ears, whispering softly so only he could hear. "You're more than a partner, Rex. You're a hero." And though the night had nearly ended in tragedy, it closed instead with the image of 7 children safe, parents reunited, and a K-9 standing tall amid the dust. A reminder that sometimes salvation arrives not in human form, but on 4 steadfast paws. The night air outside the warehouse was cold, crisp, and biting, but no one felt it. Not the officers drenched in sweat and dust. Not the parents clutching their children so tightly, their knuckles turned white. Not even Rex, whose chest still heaved with the exertion of pulling 7 children from the grip of death. All that mattered was the miracle that had just unfolded before their eyes. Families wept openly, their cries echoing into the night. Mothers fell to their knees, pressing kisses onto the soot-stained cheeks of their children. Fathers' voices cracked as they whispered reassurances, their trembling hands brushing away dirt and tears. For so many hours, they had lived with the dread that their little ones might never come home. Now the relief was overwhelming, a flood that broke through every wall of restraint. Rex stood at the center of it all, silent but steady, his ears twitching at every sound. His fur was coated in ash, his eyes red from smoke, but he remained calm, watchful, and grounded. When the youngest girl, a tiny child with tear-streaked cheeks, reached her arms toward him again, he stepped forward. Without hesitation, she wrapped herself around his neck, burying her face in his fur as if to hide from the world. The sight moved everyone. For a brief moment, the chaos of the night dissolved into a single image. A child clinging to a dog who had carried her through the darkest of dangers. Detective Daniels stood nearby, exhaustion etched into his features, but pride radiating from his posture. He watched Rex with a mixture of awe and gratitude that words could never capture. "That dog," he whispered, almost to himself, "is the reason they're all alive tonight." An older officer standing beside him nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been doing this for 30 years. I've never seen anything like it." He didn't just lead them out. He knew. He wouldn't leave until every last one was safe. Daniel swallowed hard, his throat tightening. It wasn't just about the physical rescue. It was about the way Rex had calmed the children, pushed them forward when fear rooted them in place, and refused to leave even when the building collapsed around them. He hadn't just acted like a trained police dog. He had acted like a guardian, something far greater than instinct and training. One by one, the families approached Rex, some kneeling to stroke his fur, others whispering shaky thank yous through tears. Parents who had never thought much about Police K-9 South suddenly saw him as something extraordinary. Children, still trembling from the ordeal, seemed to find strength in simply touching him, their small hands gripping his fur as if afraid he might vanish. A little boy tugged at his mother's sleeve, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mommy, the dog saved me. He told me to be brave." A mother's eyes filled with tears as she pulled her son closer. Of course, Rex hadn't spoken words, but in the boy's mind, the message had been clear enough. Somehow, in the midst of terror, the dog had communicated courage. Daniels crouched down, resting his hand gently on Rex's back. "They trust him," he said quietly, almost in disbelief. "It's like they know he was their protector in there." An officer from the rescue unit clapped Daniels on the shoulder. "Your partner didn't just save lives tonight. He gave those kids hope. That's something they'll never forget." Around them, paramedics continued tending to the children. Oxygen masks were pressed gently over small faces, bandages wrapped around minor cuts, and soothing voices reassured frightened little ones. Yet through it all, the children's eyes kept drifting back to Rex, as though checking to make sure their hero was still close by. And Rex, despite his fatigue, never pulled away. He allowed every hug, every trembling hand, every tearful whisper. His chest rose and fell heavily, but his eyes remained gentle, patient. It was as though he understood that his job wasn't finished, that these children still needed him, even now that they were safe. The warehouse, now a heap of smoldering rubble behind them, stood as a haunting reminder of how close they had all come to tragedy. Officers stood in silence, gazes fixed on the wreckage, each of them knowing that if not for Rex, this night would have ended very differently. Daniels exhaled shakily, the weight of everything pressing down on him. He had been trained for high-pressure situations, but this had been more than a mission. It had been a test of faith, of trust, of the bond between man and dog. And tonight, it was Rex who had carried them all through. "Rex isn't just a canine," Daniels murmured under his breath. "He's something more." The words hung in the air, heard only by a few nearby officers, but they struck a chord. Heads nodded slowly, eyes lingered on the dog standing tall. Among the families, and for the first time, Rex wasn't just seen as a tool of law enforcement. He was seen as a living symbol of loyalty, courage, and love. The sheriff arrived minutes later, his SUV skidding to a halt near the scene. He stepped out, taking in the chaos, the paramedics, the weeping parents, the smoldering remains of the warehouse, and finally, Rex, standing amidst it all like the unshakable center of the storm. When Daniels approached, the sheriff's face softened with rare emotion. "You saved them," he said, his voice low. "All of them." Daniels shook his head, placing a firm hand on Rex's harness. He saved them. The sheriff's gaze followed his, and for a long moment, the two men simply watched the dog as another child, clung to him like a lifeline. Then the sheriff spoke, his voice steady but full of reverence. Then the world needs to know it. It wasn't long before the flashing lights of news vans appeared on the horizon. Word of the rescue had already begun, spreading through the community. By the time the reporters arrived, parents were eager to share the story of how a dog had not only led their children to safety, but had comforted them when even adults couldn't. One mother, still holding her daughter tightly, spoke through tears to a camera. "He was their angel in there. My baby told me she followed the dog because she knew he wouldn't let her be hurt." How do you ever thank a dog for saving your child's life? The reporter's voice wavered as she replied, "I don't think words could ever be enough." As microphones turned toward Daniels, he kept his answers short, his hand never leaving Rex's side. "Rex is my partner, but tonight he was more than that. He didn't just do his duty. He gave those children back to their families. He gave them a future." Behind him, Rex sat quietly, almost regal, as though unaware of the magnitude of what he had done. Yet in the eyes of the community gathering around, he was no longer just a police dog. He was their hero. Children who had been silent since their ordeal finally found their voices again, chattering softly about how the brave dog had guided them through the dark. Parents promised themselves they would never forget this night. And officers, hardened by years of service, wiped away tears they hadn't expected. The reunion that night wasn't just about families finding their children. It was about a community rediscovering hope in the unlikeliest of forms. A dog, trained for service, had shown them something deeper than obedience and skill. He had shown them heart. And as dawn began to creep over the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of pale gold, one thing became clear to everyone present. Rex had not just saved 7 children from the jaws of disaster. He had changed the way they saw the bond between human and dog forever. A sun had begun its slow ascent, casting a golden glow over the small city that had spent the night holding its breath. The warehouse behind the rescue site was still smoldering, blackened beams jutting skyward like reminders of what might have been. But the streets were alive again. Neighbors, reporters, and community members had gathered to witness something far more significant than the wreckage, the recognition of the true hero of the night. Detective Daniels stood at the forefront of the crowd, Rex at his side. The German shepherd's fur, though dusted with ash, shone under the early sunlight. His posture was proud, ears perked, eyes alert but calm. Children, now reunited with their families, lingered close by, some tugging at Rex's leash or stroking his back. Others held small signs they had hastily painted at home. "Thank you, Rex." And our hero. The local mayor had arrived, accompanied by the sheriff, city council members, and a contingent of press eager to document the story. Cameras flashed, microphones hovered, and the hum of excitement buzzed through the chilly morning air. Yet amid the fanfare, Rex remained composed, sensing the weight of the moment without understanding the pomp. Mayor Thompson stepped forward, his suit still dusted with ash from his quick morning arrival. His voice carried over the gathering, firm but filled with reverence. "Today, we are not just celebrating survival. We are celebrating courage, loyalty, and an extraordinary act of heroism that saved 7 young lives. This city owes a debt of gratitude that words alone cannot express." The crowd erupted into applause, cheers blending with the soft sobs of parents holding their children close. Rex barked once, a sharp, commanding bark that echoed across the street, and then sound was met with a wave of laughter and further cheering. Daniels knelt beside Rex, his hand resting on the dog's neck. "You've done more than I could ever ask of you. he whispered, voice breaking slightly. Not just tonight, but every day. You've shown the world what it means to be brave. The mayor continued, pulling a folded document from his jacket. It is my honor, on behalf of this city, to award Rex the Civil Heroism Medal. This honor is usually reserved for acts of bravery by citizens and officers alike, but tonight, we recognize that courage comes in many forms. And Rex, you embody it in every step, every decision, and every heartbeat. An officer carefully fitted a small, gleaming medal onto Rex's harness. The dog tilted his head slightly, inspecting the new weight with mild curiosity, then barked softly, almost as if acknowledging the honor. Children clapped excitedly. Parents wiped tears from their cheeks, and even the most seasoned officers found themselves choking back emotion. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing as they recorded the historic moment. Microphones hovered as parents and children recounted the night's events, detailing the terror, the smoke, the collapsing warehouse, and the one constant that had kept hope alive. Rex, he saved my little girl, one mother exclaimed, hugging her daughter tightly. She would not have made it without him. He guided them, comforted them, and refused to leave until everyone was safe. A father, holding his son who had tripped during the rescue, nodded vigorously. He didn't just protect our children. He reminded us that heroes can come in forms we never expect. Tonight, a dog taught us what bravery really means. Daniel stepped forward, addressing the reporters himself. Rex is more than a canine unit. He's a symbol of courage, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond between humans and their partners, whether two-legged or four-legged. What he did tonight wasn't just heroic. It was life-changing for everyone involved. We owe him our lives, quite literally. Meanwhile, the children approached Rex again, some carrying flowers or small trinkets they had found at home. One boy offered a handmade medal, holding it in his small hands with a proud smile. "This is for you, Rex," he said simply. The German shepherd sniffed the medal carefully, then sat obediently, as if accepting the honor in the only way he knew how. Amid the celebration, Daniels noticed that the youngest girl, the one who had clung to him for protection, was still holding tightly to Rex. She whispered something in his ear. "You saved us," she said softly, barely audible to anyone else. Rex nudged her gently with his nose, then wagged his tail, almost as if understanding the depth of her words. The sheriff cleared his throat, addressing the crowd. Tonight, this city witnessed a true act of heroism. We have seen how bravery can take many forms, and that loyalty is not bound by words or uniforms. Rex has earned not only this medal, but the admiration and respect of everyone here. Let this be a reminder that courage can be found in those we might least expect. Officers began distributing small treats and water to Rex, who took each with polite patience, while the children continued to gather around, stroking his fur and whispering thanks. The community, once shaken by terror and uncertainty, now found unity in gratitude. Parents shared stories of their children's reactions during the rescue, pointing out how Rex had calmed fears, encouraged movement, and even comforted the youngest with his warmth and presence. As the sun climbed higher, the atmosphere shifted, from one of urgency to one of reflection. News crews filmed interviews, capturing footage of children hugging Rex, parents recounting the peril of the night, and officers explaining the training and instinct that had made such a rescue possible. Every angle emphasized the same truth. Rex had saved lives through courage, intelligence, and an unwavering commitment to his mission. Daniels knelt beside Rex one last time before the press conference ended. "You're our hero," he said, stroking his fur gently. "Not just tonight, not just for this city, but for every life you touch. People will remember what you did for a long, long time." Rex barked softly, tail wagging in response. Perhaps he didn't understand all the words, but he felt the love, the gratitude, and the admiration radiating from the humans around him. For a dog trained to serve, this moment was more than recognition. It was connection. Later, when the crowd began to disperse, Daniels led Rex to the police cruiser. Children waved from the safety of their parents' arms, calling out their thanks one last time. The youngest girl whispered, "Goodbye, puppy. Thank you for saving us." Rex responded with a quiet bark, his head tilting in acknowledgement, before jumping into the back of the vehicle. As the cruiser drove away, Daniels glanced back at the charred warehouse. Though it had been reduced to ruins, the memories of heroism, bravery, and life-saving courage remained. The building itself could crumble, but the story of what had transpired inside, the story of Rex, would endure forever in the hearts of those he saved. By evening, the city had begun to recognize Rex beyond just local headlines. Social media buzzed with photos and videos of the courageous dog, now hailed not just as a canine, but as a symbol of hope. Community groups started planning tributes, schools wrote letters of gratitude, and local newspapers featured Rex on the front page, declaring him the hero of the night. In the following weeks, Rex continued his duties, but the aura around him had changed. Children who had once been frightened of uniforms now ran toward him. Officers looked on with renewed respect, and the community regarded him not just as a trained dog, but as an embodiment of courage, loyalty, and selflessness. Daniels often reflected on the rescue. Every detail, every moment, every decision Rex had made replayed in his mind. And every time he saw Rex lying quietly, ears twitching at distant sounds, he was reminded of the extraordinary bond between them and the miracle they had been part of. Rex's story became legendary, not just within the police department, but across the country. The dog who raced with a backpack, who braved collapsing structures, who saved 7 children from certain death, was now immortalized in stories, hearts, and the gratitude of a community that would never forget the night a hero on 4 paws changed their lives forever. And though Rex remained humble in his actions, his heroism spoke louder than any words ever could. For in the eyes of the children, the grateful parents, and the officers who had witnessed the miracle, he was more than a canine. He was courage, loyalty, and hope embodied in fur, muscle, and heart. The world had watched in awe, and everyone who knew the story would always remember the night the German Shepherd ran with a backpack, braved the darkness, and ensured that 7 children would live to see another day.